should we wait a couple more minutes or should we get started?
I'm happy to get started, Corey.
Okay. Do we have Aaron today or no?
Aaron is out on vacation, so.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, we will call this meeting to order and see, we need to do a roll call. Somebody want to do that? I don't know who's in charge of that.
Ulrich,
Here.
Hellegard,
Present.
Keen,
Present.
Stack, Cofield,
Present.
Pehan, Buchanan, Smith,
Present.
Krauser.
Karen Hughes, proxy for Chet Krauser.
Okay, thank you. Davis, Gockler,
Grant Carlton, proxy for Donna Gockler.
thank you. Hammond,
I'm here.
Weiss, Elstad,
Present.
Jackson, Rock, Potts,
This is Vicky Cernich. I'm the proxy for Katie Potts.
thank you. Brock. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Is there anyone else on the call here that name wasn't called? Does that cover everybody?
Ian Orley with the Parking Commission.
Okay. Hey, Ian. All right, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is approval of minutes. Unless there's any objections, those will stand approved. And we'll move on to public comment. Do we have anybody viewing or on the phone? Okay.
Hey, Corey, this is Shane. I'm here in attendance just for the record.
Okay. Thanks, Shane. All right, let's move on to new business. Review and recommendation of approval of amendment number 2 to the FY 22-25 Transportation Improvement Program. Charlie?
Let me go ahead and get my screen shared for you all. For some reason that setting is not available in the current view that I have. So let me look around. All right, got it. All right, so I'm back with another tip amendment to our latest tip, the FY 2022 to 2026 tip. This is a relatively simple tip amendment compared to our last one where we had a lot of general document and process changes. So this tip amendment includes some minor and major project cost changes, addition of projects, as well as sort of a shift to the accounting of certain projects, and then project closeout adjustments. So if you're going through the tip document that's attached in the agenda, you'll see in the multiple funding sources table a couple of changes. The first is the Russell Street, Missoula UPN 4128001. This is the general sort of entire project funding category. The right-of-way amount was moved from a specific funding section within this entire project to this general funding source for the Missoula Street or the Russell Street project. And then there is $800,000 of national highway funds programmed for the early acquisition of the strip mall within this funding source. And then the Russell Street Broadway to Idaho section, UPN 4128802, had a closeout in return of $2,500 of earmark for right-of-way and over $3,000 charged to incidental construction for utility work. So in further funding tables, the Surface Transportation Program Urban, there is addition of Russell Street UPN 412001. So this is again the general entire limits of the Russell Street project and the right-of-way cost of $2.6 million and pre-FFY 2022 and right-of-way of $2.6 million and FFY 2023 were represented in this general Russell Street project funding section. And it's moved from the UPN that ends in 004 to that 001. So in the interstate maintenance funding category, the Missoula to Bonner project has seen an increase of almost $170,000 for construction in FFY 2022 to cover a bridge deck repair that was identified. And then the Bonner interchange east saw cost increase of 2.2 to reflect the authorized funds for construction. And these funds were moved from FFY 2023 to an earlier year of FFY 2022. Our next funding section, National Highways, has several project changes. So again, National Highways, it represents some of the funding changes seen in this general Russell Street project designation. And there is a right-of-way cost increase of $800,000 represented in 2022. And then the right-of-way cost represented of $2.6 million in 2024. There is an addition of a new project, Russell Street Broadway interchange, with cost designations of right-of-way for almost $500,000 and incidental construction of almost $500,000 in 2025 and construction cost of $7 million in 2026. And another project change was the West Broadway project. There was a right-of-way cost increase of over $600,000 in 2023. A construction cost decrease as represented of over $900,000, but this is due to the construction being moved out of the TIP timeframe. So it will be constructed beyond year 2026. The Lolo Missoula UPN 9939 had an incidental construction cost of just over $12,000 or almost $13,000, moved from 2023 to 2025, and construction cost of $6.5 million was moved from FY 2023 to 2026. So STPS or STPX, STPS, and SFNC saw a few project changes. West of Missoula project, this saw a construction cost of over $9 million moved out of the TIP timeframe. So this is sort of another funding source where the project was moved for construction outside of the TIP timeframe. The D1 slope stability project closed out with a cost decrease in FY 2022 of almost $80,000. And then we saw the addition of a new project, which is a safety study project, which has committed of OT funds for almost $1 million in fiscal year 2022. It is noted that only 1.5 miles of the study limits are within the MPO boundary, and a majority of the funds are committed to studying safety outside of the MPO area. In the Hsip, or Highway Safety Improvement Project Program funding section, we saw the addition of a rumble strip project on 93 North. We saw an addition of safety improvements to be added to the curve on Clements Road with a cost of $61,000. It's stated to have oversized warning signs, oversized chevrons, oversized advisory plaques, and reflective strips and chevrons. There's also been the addition of Upper Miller Creek Road safety project for over $100,000 in total. And only 0.6 miles of the 50-mile long project are included in the MPO. And the project includes new shoulder rumble strips at various curved locations along US 93 North. And lastly, the two funding sections left are Bridge Program and Mackey, or Montana Air Congestion Initiative discretionary program. There has been an addition of D1 bridge preservation of $72,000 in total. And this involves new funds for deck treatment. And only a portion of this project in total are included in the MPO boundary. For Mackey funds, the Broadway and Toole Avenue project has a cost increase of $46,000 in FFY 2022, and the movement of incidental construction of over $28,000 has been shifted from 2022 to 2024, and construction has been shifted from 2022 to 2025. The increase in PE is to include staff time from the city of Missoula to help in the production of the proposed design changes. In the transportation alternatives funding section, we have the addition of path preservation. So this was won through competitive grants, and it is $100,000 committed to pavement preservation on the north side Greenways Trail. So from Warden Avenue to Waverly. I'm sure many of you have biked on this pathway and are aware of its current conditions. So that is an awesome, encouraging project. And then another competitive grant win has been the school sidewalk, or Lolo School Sidewalk project, which goes from Lakeside Drive up to US 93 South. And this will be to construct sidewalks along this section of Rome Farm Lane, as well as Lewis and Clark Drive. It has a name change partway through the roadway section for the movement of the Lolo School. Just a general public notice background, we had a legal ad sent out to Missoulian 30 days in advance to this amendment change, as it will hopefully be approved in TPCC later this month. The dates are shown here, January 23rd through the Sunday of February 13th. And we have also posted information of the new tip as they become available and updated on our website, as well as the agenda. So I'd like to open this to any questions. We have a comment from Vicky as well as Jeremy. I think I will take Vicky's comment.
Thank you, Charlie. Hey, on the NH for that West Broadway Old Highway 10 project,
Okay.
The construction costs were moved to 2025, so they're not outside of the time frame of the tip. I just wanted to make sure that we knew that.
All right, I may have misstated that. There's
Okay, cool.
quite a lot of project changes.
Yes, there are.
I'll make sure that we both have that information is stated correctly. And
Okay.
I'm not going to pull you guys through
Nope.
this presentation to see if I had it written correctly.
Thank you.
Thanks. Jeremy?
Thanks, Charlie. I had a couple of clarifications. Actually, I have three questions.
Okay.
First one is the Russell Broadway interchange. Is that a new project? Are we splitting the Russell Street project with that?
My understanding to it is it's in addition to what was previously considered in the pre-existing Russell Street designation. So it's being considered as a new project.
Charlie, if I could speak to that, I think that should not say interchange and it should say intersection, because we have the two final Russell Street segments. And so there's the Russell Street that goes Dakota to Mount. And I think this Russell interchange is the Russell intersection at Russell and Broadway.
It is, yes. I think our tables have the project description as an interchange, but I may have misread that. I was just going with the technical term there. So yes, it is an intersection improvement and funding for the intersection at Russell Street and Broadway.
So I think that's an important clarification. I think interchange is going to create confusion about what that project is. And this is the intersection and completion of the Broadway portion of the Russell Street project. Is that correct?
Yes. I can see we have in the tables, there's sort of an abbreviated version. So I may have misstated and just went with ENT as interchange rather than intersection, but I can go back and see if it's designated as a interchange and request that that project be renamed if it does state interchange.
Yeah, because we do have the project name for our records. It is intersection.
I'll continue if that's okay.
Yep.
Second question is on that Miller Creek Hsip project. I'm confused. Is that on Miller Creek Road or is it actually on Highway 93?
I'll speak to this, Charlie. That's why I have my hand raised. If we could go to that, I think it's slide 7. Okay, so that bottom paragraph there that talks about the 50-mile long project, that should actually be under the Rumble Strip, the 93 North Rumble Strip project. And then the Upper Miller Creek, and the Upper Miller Creek project, it is to install centerline and shoulder edge line epoxy striping and upgrade the curve signing. And this goes for, oh gosh, I've got the corridor number. So it's corridor 6485. Let me double check what that is, but
Sorry, Jacqueline, I can jump in and help. The Miller Creek Road is from RP 00 to RP 3.48. And then Upper Miller Creek Road is from RP 206 to RP 2.98, if that helps.
I don't know if that helps you all, but I can send out a mapped description of where those limits are. I struggle with the RP2 or RP descriptions as well. So I have to sort of do my background research and just generally do some limits mapping if it's not available on the MDT active projects map online.
Well, thanks for the clarification on that, Jacqueline. That makes sense to me now. Okay, last question, then I'll get off. Broadway tool, Mackey project. Am I reading that correctly that we're shifting the funding out to 2025 for construction? And does that mean that there would not be money available for construction if we were able to have that project ready sooner?
I'm going to have to refer to Vicky or Jacqueline on this.
Vicky, I don't know if you have a response to that. I do know, Jeremy, I have way overdue owed you responses to the roundabout. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Vicky, do you know?
I am only so this has nothing to do with the roundabout. These are just the figures that we the dollar amounts that we got from the TCP for construction, and so it's showing in 2025 right now.
Okay. So
In terms of the Mackey program, though, I'm not exactly sure where we stand on that in terms of the movement of years.
So Jeremy, I'm going to say that that's moved out just because we haven't figured out what we're doing, and the project just hasn't gone anywhere because we're still figuring things out. So that's why there was that adjustment in moving it out.
So, okay, I'm going to object to that because this was a project that had funding in 21 or 22, and now we're moving it out to 25. And I think that there's potential for that project to go sooner than that. And I'd hate to see that funding move to a point where we have to wait a couple more years.
Well, I guess it depends on what the project is. I mean, if the project changes a whole heck of a lot, I don't know. Even if the Mackey funding would be, well, eligible, I'm sure, ideally it would be, but, I don't know.
Well, we haven't had that opportunity to have that discussion at all. So I don't want to make a tip amendment here that puts us in a position of not having that funding available.
Jeremy, I think we're at a point where I need to set up a meeting between the city and MDT so we can talk about this intersection and what direction we really want to go and what the action items are for going that direction. Are you good with that?
Yes. What do we do today with this?
I personally haven't worked on a tip amendment where one particular change is stricken from the draft, but I can get back to you all and confirm if that is a process we're able to follow. But that is what my sort of immediate suggestion would be to keep the Broadway Tool Avenue project as it was in the previous tip, Amendment 1, and go forward with other changes as stated.
Well, considering it is federal fiscal year, it's 2022 right now. Is it even legitimate to think that something can go in 2022 as far as construction?
So yeah, Vicky, that was my concern. By leaving it or not approving this and leaving it in 22, I don't think we realistically are going to meet that, knowing that the goal is to change the scope of the project. And we could there's a chance we could make 2022, maybe, if we left the scope as is with just the signal upgrades. But if there's any right of way that's needed, 2022 is not realistic. But as we've talked previously about this project, that's not really what the long-term goal or the real hope is for that intersection. It is to get a roundabout in there. So the the question came up for the discussion of what's the point of even moving the signal project ahead when we don't really want that and focus more on getting the roundabout there. And so if we really do want to go with the roundabout, I think we need to move it out, because that 22, leaving it there is not going to be realistic.
Jacqueline, one question I have is if you do, move that out, those Mackey funds would still be available for that roundabout project then? Correct?
Certainly not the entire roundabout. I mean, because you know what was part of the Mackey portion that was doing the interchange is pretty tiny comparatively, and there isn't any more Mackey to be thrown at the project. But you're right.
I guess that's my question though, is and maybe Jeremy, food for thought, if we're looking at potentially utilizing CMAQ, maybe that lessens the impact and burden on CMAQ funding if we can utilize the Mackey. Just I guess a thought.
Well, that was my hope. This is one of the projects we've discussed putting some CMAQ money towards, and I had assumed that the Mackey money would still be available. I don't disagree with you, Jacqueline, that we're not going to get this done in 22, but can we move it to 23 instead and kind of keep this one on the front burner instead of potentially having to wait a couple of years?
Or Vicky, I'll let you speak to the funding side of things, but just thinking about schedule wise, so for it to go in 23, we would have to have any right of way that is needed acquired by October of this year.
Jacqueline?
Yep.
Where are you guys at in schedule right now? Have you done a PFR or are you starting from scratch?
For the roundabout, we would be starting from scratch. The city has come up with a concept, and Jeremy, I'll let you correct me if I'm wrong, but they have something sketched, but the design details need to be reviewed thoroughly and tweaking made. But I think the concept of a roundabout going there, I don't believe there's opposition to that. It's just working out the design details of it. And so then there's going to be identifying what right of way is needed and getting that, utility relocates, those bigger elements that put the schedule in others' hands as well.
Yeah. And are you doing this in-house or is this a consultant design?
Right now, the project as is, which is the signal project, is an in-house project.
Okay.
But I think there's also, and Jeremy, I don't know if you want to expand more on this, but there was also talk about if this could be possibly a leg project. Jeremy, you can tell me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, we were having that discussion. So I don't know. I mean, maybe this is just housekeeping right now, and we come back with a retooling of this project once we've had a chance to really talk through what the options are. But it just seemed a little bit out of order to me to start moving funding around before we have made any formal decisions about where we want to go with the project. We haven't abandoned the signal project. We're just exploring another option right now. So I just don't want to lose the ability to use this funding in a timeline that we may be able to put together a project.
So I guess the only thing I would add, Jeremy, and I think what I'm hearing you say is let's keep the TIP amendment as proposed, but be flexible on sliding it back if we can get scope and budget figured out. The only thing I would say from an MDT perspective would be that I'm sure Vicky, and I don't know who's managing the Mackey program, but if you've got a project that isn't going to make it, that puts a lot of strain and stress on your Mackey program. And so it makes sense to move that out until you have a certain schedule. And until then, I can see MDT's perspective that it makes sense to move it out.
Shane, you're exactly correct. And, right now with the program, it looks as though 2023 is pretty tight, that all of that money is spoken for. So that's that's certainly why it's showing up in 2025. And, I don't think that there's anything wrong with putting it in 2024 and, revisiting as we get closer. After, you guys meet and decide what all is going to go there and how it's all going to work out. I mean, this is CN we're talking about. So in terms of the tip, and I see that Ryan's hand's up, so hopefully I don't get flicked on the side of the head for this. The construction part, it is kind of flexible, and you guys have seen this in our tip amendments before. The construction dates change and move forward or move back. So, it's not set in concrete, never to be moved again. Although, let me just reiterate that, Mackey funds in construction in 2023 are super tight right now. So 2024, I think, would be a more realistic place to put those funds.
Okay, Shane, you had your hand up?
Well, if I have other questions not related to this topic, if we want to finish this one, and then I'll go.
All right. Ryan, was your hand up for this topic?
Yes, but not to flick Vicky. What she said was fine. No, I just wanted to, just back up a minute here. I mean, as has already been pointed out, I mean, funds can move up or back in years. I think what the big picture point to keep in mind here is that the tip ought to reflect what the MPO's best information is right now. And so if your best information right now is that you're not likely to proceed with this project in 22, then you ought to do the amendment to reflect what your best information suggests is true right now. And if that changes and you move it back up, well, then that's the best information you'd have at that time. So just big picture point there, and that's it for me.
Ben, was your hand up about this topic or different?
It was up about a different topic, but based on what Vicky's saying and understanding that, the obligation authority issues that there are, perhaps there's a friendly modification we can make to this tip amendment where we push it to 24 instead of 25, or leave this one out of it until, for a later month when we have more discussion about what's actually feasible at that intersection. Trying to help Charlie out here for how to craft the language around when it gets time to make the motion.
Okay. Shane, you're up next.
All right, two questions, and I think they're pretty simple. I want to go back to that Miller Creek Hsip project, Jacqueline, and when I was reading the information when it was sent out, I was a little nervous because I did see rumble strips, and I want to confirm there are no shoulder or centerline rumble strips as part of that project, that it is just epoxy striping and some signing.
That is correct.
And,
Good.
and Shane, that was my bad.
Well,
Shouldn't have said that.
Well, darn it, maybe this is my opportunity to flick you in the head. I'm kidding. And then, so thank you, Jacqueline. I appreciate that. And then the other question was, have you guys, I think you had advertised that Bonner Interchange East job. And if you had, has it been let and awarded yet?
Yeah, letting was last month and bids came in good.
Okay.
And that one is tied with the two other projects. So yeah, I don't see why it wouldn't be awarded.
And do you know who the low bid was?
Oh gosh.
Was it Riverside by chance?
No, it was not Riverside.
Okay. I can look it up. That's all right.
I think it was LHC.
Okay. All right.
But I'll confirm and put it in the chat.
All right.
Or I guess I can't put it in the chat.
I can just go out and look it up too, Jacqueline.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, Ben, you're up.
Thanks, Corey. I guess I still have questions about the Russell Broadway intersection. I thought that Russell Broadway was part of phase 2 of Russell Street. It's included in the roll plots, and I thought it was part of the funding agreement. And so can Jacqueline or Vicky just provide a little more clarification? Is this new money, or are we just separating existing money out from the previous funding agreements to have this be a standalone project number?
They are, it is the same project we've had. They are being developed as separate plan sets just because we don't know how the funding will work out when we go to construct them. And if they develop together and we can tie them for construction in 1 year, that's great. But if we don't end up having the funding to do them both together, then we don't have to scramble to split them up in different plan sheets. So we can let the one, and then maybe the next year or whatever, we can let the other one. Does that answer your question, Ben?
I think so. I guess my concern is just that we're not that roughly $8 million is not in addition to what has already been obligated to Russell Street, but this is just a different way of parsing the existing money that's been obligated to Russell Street.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Shane, you had your hand up still?
I just really like having my hand up, Corey. It's
All right, if there are no more comments or questions, I'll seek a motion on this agenda item.
Alrighty, thanks. Yeah, so for the FY 2022 to 2026 adoption motion, the staff recommends approval of this TIP Amendment 2 as proposed. And option 2 is what the staff does not recommend, but to not approve TIP Amendment 2 and direct staff as necessary. And I'm open to taking down in-depth notes for any if you direct us away from approval.
Jeremy?
So Charlie, is there an option for us to amend the motion, or do we just not approve the motion and ask you to reframe this? I'm not sure what the procedure is.
I'm honestly not sure either, and it's sort of unfortunate that Aaron is out right now because this is the first TIP amendment that I've been involved in where there might be a hang up on one part of it. So my immediate response is I think we approve as proposed. And the other option would just be to bring back the TIP amendment next month as an entire thing. But Vicky seems to have a comment there.
Sorry, I was unmuted. Yeah, I do. I think we could approve Amendment 2 with a caveat that we will move the construction date for Broadway Tool to 2024 if everybody's agreeable.
Vicky, I would just add to that in that also that we update the language on the US 93 rumble strips stuff and the Miller Creek project as well.
Yeah.
Great.
David?
So maybe I'll make a motion that we approve the FY 2022-2026 TIP amendment number 2 with the corrections to the Hsip projects, as well as moving the Broadway Tool intersection project Mackey funds into 24 rather than 25.
I have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Jeremy, second. All right. Do we have any more comment? Do we have any comment from the public? Okay, if there's none, then all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? All right, that motion will pass as amended. All right, next agenda item is discussion on comments to be submitted in response to the bipartisan infrastructure law request for input. Charlie?
I'm gonna go ahead and share another presentation I have up and ready. So hopefully this can be a more fun and involved discussion and just sort of a brainstorming of ideas. So the bipartisan infrastructure law that was adopted in November of last year is open for us to provide comment. So this presentation, I'm just going to go over what this means. We have an opportunity to provide descriptive comments. We have a few comments formulated that aren't completely written out, but we're confirmed that they generally are oriented towards what we want to submit. And then there's also comments from other organizations that we would like to submit comments of support for. And then, of course, I would like this to be a discussion-oriented presentation. So if you have anything to add or ideas or ways to expand upon our formulated comments, please let me know and we'll have them noted down. So the request for information is an opportunity to provide comments on this newly adopted bipartisan infrastructure law. There is currently no defined closing date for these comments, but the sooner the better, because it will lead to having formulated programs for us to then work with. Currently, there's just over 100 comments submitted to the online platform. And I checked just this morning, went through all of them, and there's not any comments from MPOs. So I think it's important for us to have a voice out there, as well as provide comments for an MPO that has a population less than 200,000. And I'll get into why later. So the scope of desired comments, FHWA is seeking comments on new programs and other changes. So we've looked at how sort of previously existing funding sources have shifted, or new funding sources have been made available, and tried to formulate comments directly on those. They described a description of useful comments. So we might have heard a comment.
Yes. How are you doing?
Hello, Dave. How are you? Dave just joined us. So we have a useful comment has a specific reference to a section of the bill. So people reading these comments can go to and see what we're referencing, and then a detailed description of the action and further information. So our comments that we've formulated in general have all of this information. And there's one comment we are working on to expand, create specific references. So for a general background of the process, we heard that this RFI was open, and we got together key staff. So Jeremy, Corey were there, Shane Stack was there, and other MPO staff to review the comments that we wanted to submit, that we had worked on, as well as just get general ideas. And then to expand upon that, we have brought this information to you all for discussion. So our first comment is on the congestion mitigation and air quality funding section. The specific reference is to a new carbon reductions program that is being integrated into CMAQ funds. And this funding source provides 2.56% of remaining CMAQ funds. So there's other committals there, and 2.56% of the total CMAQ funds are to be committed to a sort of a wider array of projects. So I think ones that are applicable to the MPO are the advancement of transportation congestion management technologies. So you can think ITS, and there's many projects that we are considering to fund with this. Deployment of alternative fuel vehicles, acquisition, installation, or operation of publicly accessible electrical vehicle charging infrastructure, or hydrogen, natural gas, and propane vehicle fueling infrastructure. I think this area, particularly electrical vehicle charging infrastructure, has been a huge point of discussion in local policy, as well as our emerging mobility playbook and programs that we've identified in the long range plan. And then lastly, to fund projects that do not result in the construction of new capacity. So we suggest with this comment, maybe to provide a greater percentage of available CMAQ funds to this program, as it provides sort of a broader depth of sustainability oriented transportation projects, as well as to commit these funds as discretionary funds to MPOs, specifically with MPOs or localities that have an adopted climate action plan or carbon reduction strategy plan, because part of this policy is that these funds would be made available to states that have a carbon reduction strategy plan. So in alignment with that, we would want NPOs or our MPO to have a carbon reduction strategy plan adopted. Are there any thoughts on this formulated comment? See none, but we'll continue on. So the next comment is on the Bridge Investment Program, and Vicky sort of made this point known. For the Bridge Investment Program competitive grant, there's an eligibility limitation for MPOs with a population over 200,000, and our MPO has a population far less than that, and that's the minority of MPOs in this country. So our comment is to make MPOs with any population size eligible for this project, as we see that there's many important bridge projects that we have in the area that should be made available for funding. This description does not exclude the city or county for applying to these grants, but in my experience working on grants here, the city, county, and MPO tend to work together, and it could be an efficient way for sort of whoever is submitting to be able to apply this federal program. Do you have any comment on this formulated comment we've created? Awesome. So the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program, we have two comments on different aspects of this grant. So the first is eligibility. This grant program is designed to fund safety action plans from localities, as well as to fund the products of these safety action plans. So we can think specific projects. And there is not a in-depth description of what counts as a safety action plan within the grant description. And so our comment is to provide a more in-depth description of what this is, as we have a community transportation safety plan, which is a framework for that has identified our primary causes of crash history, and a general framework for solutions. But what they might be asking for is a more in-depth direct safety analysis that leads to a list of projects. The outcome of our CTSP has created a framework for prioritizing projects based on safety, and that has been contributory towards our LRTP project list. But we would like more specificity there to see if our CTSP and the product of it could be used to fund direct safety-oriented projects. Our next comment on this grant program is to include risk factor analysis into the prioritization of projects submitted for this grant. Risk factor analysis looks at different project qualities and expands beyond just crash history of a project area. We think this is important because we have many areas that are concerning in terms of safety, just due to speed, design qualities, traffic volumes, in general level of pedestrian and bike activity, but don't necessarily have a high crash history. So including risk factor analysis, which is sort of an expanding area of study to do a more proactive way of looking at safety and planning around it, could contribute to the competitive qualities of projects we may be submitting for this grant. That's our second part of that comment for Safe Streets for All program. And then a general comment that I'm still working on and would appreciate just sort of more input from FTA and FHWA staff is the development of a comment that conveys the need for greater flexibility with large FHWA grants. From our conversation, Jeremy and Corey made note that there might be a difference in the grant agreement requirements that have make for more ease for FTA grants compared to FHWA grants. So the goal is to support a comment that creates greater flexibility around the scope, cost, and schedule changes that occur in the lifetime of a project, as when you submit projects, there's just sort of a more rough status of how that project looks as submitting. And as the years go on, costs increase and scope changes. So this might be a great one for Jim sort of expand upon the discussion we had last week, as I am struggling with this one to attach to specific written points within the bill text. So this might just generally be a broad comment without those specific comment suggestions that the bill or the RFI provides. See hand from Ryan.
Yeah, well, so Charlie, I just want to, I think you've done a great job here being very mindful of the instructions presented for comments. So I think, you're doing a good job there. In this case, yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't know if you can attach this to a particular segment of bill, but it's still a comment worth making. And I think that whether you make this comment or not, and I think you should, but whether you make this comment or not, this is definitely something that's front of mind in our agency, and the FTA comparison is a good one, and obviously one close to my heart personally, having spent so much of my life over there, because this is something that in the bill era, FHWA will likely end up maybe wanting to behave a little bit more like FTA does, because FTA has a long experience with doing direct grants like this, and FHWA has this model that I think we can borrow from our sibling Surface Transportation Agency here in USDOT, and I think we will likely be again borrowing from that model going forward, whether this comment's made or not, but. Again, I don't say that to discourage you from making the comment. I think you should. I think having another voice in this choir, having this point made from the grassroots is helpful, whether you can attach it to a specific statutory provision or not. So,
awesome. Yeah, I think sort of a language that you said could add to this comment, just borrowing from the FTA model of grant management, could be a good way of pointing FHWA staff towards formulating based off of FTA. I appreciate that. So I keep rolling. Awesome. So again, we want to submit comments of support for comments that have been submitted by other organizations. So for example, I saw that the Adventure Cycling Association had committed comments of support for the League of American Bicyclists. So we can do the same, but for a variety of organizations within our comment document. One that I thought may be of importance, we can come to agreement on it, but the National Association for Towns and Townships formulated a general comment to provide more discretionary funds that could be applicable to local roads. And they provided some statistics on the amount of funds that actually trickle down into funding the maintenance and improvement of local roads. This comment is from the League of American Bicyclists, and it pertains to the Transportation Alternatives Program, and essentially about creating more efficiency within the Transportation Alternatives Program, and ensuring that the funds made available to transportation alternatives are completely committed to that. Because from my understanding within the comment that those transportation alternatives funds can be shifted by a state DOT to other programs after a certain length of time. All right. Do you have any comments here? So our next comment from the League of American Bicyclists that we'd like to support is on the Highway Safety Improvement Program. So it's a general comment to create a greater priority for vulnerable roadway users. So matching and prioritizing projects that have a high crash history of vulnerable roadway users and ensuring that a specific percentage, specifically 15% or more of the available funds are committed to addressing vulnerable roadway user safety. And this comment continues onward in creating a best practice or suggesting a best practice for how to match those available funds to a specific percentage that is oriented towards vulnerable roadway user safety infrastructure. We have a comment from Lynn.
Yeah, the only thing that I would put a caveat on that, I would hate for that 15% to be able directed towards educational type stuff, outreach type stuff. I'd rather have it go into projects that are actually going to provide safety for those users, not just tell them how to cross the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can follow up with you on this, but the way that this comment is written for the best practices is just creating a mathematical process that would be required at the FHWA level for these projects that would ensure that 15 or more percent for the construction would be committed to things like bike lanes, sidewalks, crossing infrastructure, et cetera, because currently I don't think that exists in how it is written.
Well, I still think it is, having made these comments for years, I think it's appropriate to put it in there. Just, it's a lot easier to clean these things up on the front end than it is on the back end.
Yep. Yeah. My point there was that point that it is to be committed to hard infrastructure is written in. I've just pulled sort of a short description from each one of these comments. So that is included in the larger comment that we'd be supporting. We have a comment from Shane.
Yeah, just it sounds like this 15% is already in the language, and I wonder if 15% seems like a high number, and I doubt like a state like Montana has anywhere near 15% of its fatalities related. And I wonder if there should be some, a response maybe more to the effect of, in rural states, maybe that number is 10% or 5%, or maybe just in general, the percentage of fatalities that same percentage needs to go back towards, correction of fatalities related to those VRUs, if that makes sense. I think there's some potential there for us to be able to use Hsip money to go to this cause and this need. And I think 15% is way out of reach from a state like Montana. And this is set up as a one size fits all, and it certainly doesn't fit this state. I don't think anyway. I could be completely wrong. Maybe the fatalities are 15%, but I highly doubt it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Actually, that was not something that I'd considered. I can sort of alter the percentage of vulnerable roadway users based off of local data to come up with something more fitting to our circumstances. Or just figure out how to reformulate this to take into account how that could benefit and sort of be oriented towards our local circumstances.
Certainly
Charlie, I think what, the simplest thing would be is just take the percentage in Montana and say, whatever that percentage is, that percentage has to be spent on that VRU, if that makes sense. So if we had 3% of our fatalities were as a result of these VRUs, then 3% of the Hsip program has to go towards that.
Great idea.
Does it have to be at the statewide level, or can that be broken out at the MPO level? Because I think within our MPO, that percentage is probably higher. Certainly this year is off to a tragic start with pedestrian fatalities.
I guess my response to that, Ben, would just be that, the Hsip program is a statewide program. It's not broken out by district or MPO. So I think you'd have a hard time trying to say this percentage goes to the MPO, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. I think I'm gonna just take a look at our local safety data and compare it to the state and do what I can with that information to come up with some numbers that are more fitting to our circumstances that convey the same idea. We need to commit a sort of relative percentage to address vulnerable roadway users. Does everybody agree with that idea? We can head onwards. Thank you, Shane, for that comment. I think that's super productive. The next comment is on the Bridges program. And it's generally to be more specific about what is defined as a reasonable cost for active transportation infrastructure to be included in bridge projects, because that is not currently written out in specificity in the bill text. So it's just something generally that we can support. As with the last one, wasn't sort of a thought of connecting it to local circumstances, but if you have an idea of what a reasonable cost could be defined as with Missoula's circumstances, that'd be a great discussion point here for me to build off of. Alrighty. Our next comment is on the Safe Streets for All program. And a large sort of theme of the comments that I've seen from various organizations is related to equity concerns. And this equity concern is about the Vision Zero plans that will be funded by the Safe Streets and Roads for All competitive grant. And some specifics on what should be funded and who should fund it. So the local entities should have law or policy prohibiting racial profiling. The plan should ensure enforcement, because traffic enforcement is a large part, unfortunately, or fortunately, of Vision Zero programs and plans. And then the grantee will report on all enforcement actions done under this grant. So I just think this is an important thing to do. I think speaking to the specifics of enforcement action that have been put in place by Vision Zero is a large topic of conversation, and something that we can expand our support on locally. Is there any thoughts there? Alrighty. So our last comment is from the Congress for the New Urbanism, and it's to create specific definition for connectivity that aligns with programs' community-oriented goals, and this is around the Reconnecting Communities program, which is oriented around reconnecting broken infrastructure due to historic transportation development decisions. So you can think of highways that have been constructed that have broken apart communities in the past. And there's just a sort of, this comment's quite long, but the general idea of it is, how do we define connectivity, and how can we prioritize projects in an objective way with connectivity in mind. So I think it's something to support that, we'd like this to be defined. And if we are to submit a project to it, we'd like our projects to stack up in a way that we're able to analyze and write to. Is there any ideas here? All right, sounds good. Lastly, an idea that I did not include here, but I thought I'd just speak to. There was several comments for using a national equity marker that has been formulated by Harvard University. And after looking at this suggested equity marker, it seems like it prioritizes sort of more racially and ethnically diverse communities than Missoula, without consideration for the equity circumstances here that have been identified in Invest Health neighborhoods. So a comment that may be submitted, if you all are in agreement, is something about considering locally adopted equity or spatial equity objectives as sort of national markers do not always favor less racially and ethnically diverse communities, although there is equity issues here that are worthy of solving. Any other finalized thoughts? We have Jeremy here.
Charlie, I just want to make a comment on something that's in the memo that you provided about the section on the bridge investment program. When we're talking about the population that our MPO serves, I assume the 82,000 residents is what falls within our MPO boundary.
Our planning area, yes.
Planning area. I guess I would say that we should talk about the population that we serve that's outside of that boundary, because the reality is all of the outlying places come into Missoula and use these facilities. And so we're unique in that our population is more spread out as a rural state, but Missoula as a population center pulls in all that population for all the things that exist in Missoula. So I think as we advocate for ourselves as an MPO and the eligibility, we ought to talk about that greater population.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I didn't include the entire text of the comments that we formulated, but I did make note of just the importance of the bridges that our MPO area holds in connecting, several nationally significant highways in the general Western Montana region. So I can expand upon that to make note of the unique circumstances of low density and how, although we have a relatively small MPO area, people well beyond our boundaries are routinely in this region.
If you added up the population of Ravalli County and Missoula County and maybe Granite County, what would that be? 200,000 people?
I can do the math on that. My assumption is it very easily would be.
Yeah. Thanks.
We have a comment from Ben.
Yeah, just to follow up on Jeremy's point, I don't think it's there's already numbers put to that in the long range transportation plan that looks at how many people are commuting into Missoula from outside of the planning area. And so I think that you'd have some grounds within, already accomplished MPO work to put numbers to that pretty easily. I just wanted to vocalize support for the last comment that you made that doesn't have a slide associated with it. And I think it's very important to address other forms of equity as well, along with racial and ethnic. I think that our income inequality and our health inequities we've done a lot of work locally around those, and I think that it really that it would behoove us to make a comment that helps further trying to address some of those inequities that we've identified.
Great. Yeah, that was one I was kind of unsure on, but I think it's of value. So I can formulate something and pass it by you before submitting. So to follow sort of this topic up, we will be bringing this to TPCC and hopefully have more time to develop specific document, well written out completely, to then have TPCC's approval in 2 weeks. And in general, I have John taking notes so I can follow up on all of our discussion here and hopefully expand even more as I have more time to research and look at the comments from other organizations that are rapidly going in onto the register.gov website page for this RFI opportunity.
Charlie, I also didn't get a chance to fully digest your comment on the transportation alternative slide. Do you mind going back to that and reviewing that one again?
Where is it? Ooh, frozen. Yeah, so the transportation alternatives. So I sort of pulled specific text from the League of American Bicyclists and shorten this. Then we could walk through this together. So the comment was to create more specificity around state TA programs, from my understanding. So to list all of the eligible projects that MPO or local government can apply to for TA grants, and then highlight the promotion of Hsip as a local funding match option, and then highlight MPOs and how they have obligation authority over transportation alternative funds. And then further, there's general comments on how to increase efficiency of TA programs and to ensure that states commit the full funding of TA funds to that program. Because from what the comment designated is that up to 50% can be reformulated into other funding areas if the state so desires.
Okay, I guess I'd like to propose adding a comment too about TA and making it so it's not just large MPOs, but all MPOs get obligation authority over TA, and get an allocation. I still see TA as being it's been really hampered our efforts moving from the CTEP allocation that we used to be able to plan for to a grant program that we can't plan for and can't accommodate and can't program. I think it's really challenging, and it would behoove us to just get an allocation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe us two can get together and talk about this, as well as how the state has sort of discussed reformulating the TA program in general and come up with something that addresses that idea in years that you just provided. So that is what I have for this area of discussion. I hope you all sort of agree with these in general. And I also have Bob Giordano wanting to expand upon these. So at TPCC, if you all are attending, you should see some expansion to the comments. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Charlie. Move on to 4.3, review and approval of a letter of support for the US 93 9 pipe and Post Creek Safety Project. John?
Thanks, Corey. Jeremy's comment earlier about population outside of the Missoula area is a perfect segue for this. So last week in our agenda attachment, there was a letter of support for the, this is my new favorite acronym, NSFLTP, Naturally Significant Federal Lands and Tribal Projects Program. So I hope you had all had a chance to look at that letter. I wanted to share this project map that I received from Big Sky Public Relations that kind of helps understand the extent of this project a little more. I got a comment from Shane about clarification. what this letter is requesting. So starting north here in Ronan, there's the urban project, which you might have heard about, which is the couplets. MDT is facilitating that. So what this letter of support is for is the 9 pipe section, which goes from Brook Lane down to Gunlock, and then the Post Creek section is from Gunlock down to Dublin, just south of Dublin Gulch, where the existing improved highway starts down there. So for today, I would like to just have a quick discussion about any amendments to the letter. Of course, there will be a few changes to the project extents, just to clarify that. And then we also had the recommendation to include the entire project mileage, which is 8 miles, 8-mile section. And so the other amendment is that this letter will be coming from the chair of TPCC, Dave Strohmeyer. It says Aaron Wilson there in the letter, but that is another change I would propose as amended. So with that, sorry, my dog is squeaking the toy. With that, I can open it up to discussion about any comments or amendments to that letter.
Great. Thank you. Shane?
I see Jacqueline has her hand up too. Maybe she's already going to address this, but Jacqueline, I just saw a notice that MVP is going to do some sort of feasibility study on the 9 pipe section. And I'm wondering how that fits in with this application and timing and everything.
Yep, thanks for that, Shane. So yes, we do have a study going on right now for the 9 pipe section, and it really is to help support. So yeah, it's to support completion of 93. So we've known for a while that CSKT has wanted to complete this segment of 93, but as you guys have heard continuously, we just do not have the funding to address all the needs that just continue to grow. So CSKT has come across this grant opportunity and would like to pursue it, and we want to support them in pursuing this grant. However, we only have a project nominated for Post Creek, and so we've done work and evaluation for the Post Creek section. And to be completely honest with everybody, there is a lot of challenges with Post Creek, and we expect that there's also a lot of challenges with 9 pipes. So just like with all the grants, there is a short turnaround time. Once you get the grant, you have to construct within so many years. And knowing that there is a lot of risk, we're worried about fully evaluating the risk within that short time frame and constructing the project. So we are working on this study. The study won't be completed until fall of this year. Vicki, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And we are doing regular outreach on that. There are a couple, so let me pause there before I go into something else. Shane, did I address your comments and concerns?
Yeah, I guess one other question. What is the price of the 9 pipe section? And then the last price I saw in Post Creek it was around 23 million. Is that still about the price?
Yes, we don't have, yes, for Post Creek, it is, I'd have to look it up exactly, but it is not cheap. It is, gosh, I thought it was more like 28 million. 9 pipes, because we don't have a project, we don't have a cost estimate for it. And so that's been something that's been talked about with the study, and the grant conversation is trying to come up with some type of somewhat realistic or in the ballpark estimate for the project.
Well, I think that 9 pipe section, if I remember right, was going to be in the $50+ million range. And so I think between the two projects, my guess is you're somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 or more million. The benefit for that is if the tribes can get the whatever alphabet soup funding, that for me, what I see is that frees up your NH funding to be used in communities like Missoula or in the MPO. So.
Yep. Looking at the letter, there is just a couple things that aren't quite, well, I guess there's some suggestions that I have on the data that's provided. So on the second paragraph, where it talks about, it's the last sentence, and it gives the limits for the multimodal accommodations. And that should actually, instead of being Horn, it should be Red Horn Road. And then it might be better to just say that it extends up to the southern limits of the Ronan Urban Project. And it'll just connect to the facilities there. And then the other one that I have a little hesitation on is the traffic volume comment. So they talk about how volumes are growing rapidly. And as part of this study that we're working on for the Nine Pipes area, that's not actually what we're seeing. In the early 2000s, the traffic was pretty high. And well, let me look up, I'll tell you exactly what it was. We were just a smidge over 9,000 for the AADT. And then it dropped off for a bit and for a few years. And then around 2014, traffic started picking up. And then it's just been kind of hovering at a level amount from around 2016 to now. And so it's back not quite to that 9,000. And as part of the study, they also did look at growth rates, and the growth rates that we're expecting or feel are most appropriate for this area is not that out of line with what we see in other areas. So we're figuring around a 2.8% growth rate. So it's not quite aligning with what's stated in the letter.
All right, thank you for those comments and clarification about the extent of multi-use trail was a little confusing with the information I was given. So thanks for clarifying that. And the other comments about traffic volumes and growth are noted.
All right, Vicky?
This is really just adding on to this is more an answer to Shane's comment, and educational for you guys as well. So in 2008 there was a supplemental environmental impact statement. So the feasibility study that's being done on the Nine Pipe section right now is to look at that preferred alternative that came out of that supplemental EIS, just to verify changes in what's going on out there, and to look at the risks, etc. So it's not looking at new alternatives. This is just looking at the preferred alternative from 2008.
Great, thanks, Vicky. All right, if there are no more comments on that, then I will seek a motion that TTAC recommend TPCC approval of a letter of support for the US 93 Nine Pipe and Post Creek sections project.
So moved.
Okay, goes second.
Oh, sorry, I didn't unmute fast enough. Can we get the modifications to the letter included with that approval?
With modifications.
Thank you, Shane.
Okay, great. We have somebody want to second that?
This is Jacqueline, I second.
Okay. All right, so we have an amended motion. Okay, any more discussion on the item?
I just want to say I'm happy to send out a revised letter once I get those edits in, if you'd all like that.
Okay, any comment from the public? Okay, if not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? All right, the motion passes. All right, do we have no old business? Any announcements or closing comments from anyone?
Yeah, this is Shane. I would just say, Charlie and John, good job today on the presenting.
Great, thank you for saying that for me, Shane. I neglected to do that. All right, if there's nothing else, then we will be adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.